The message came from beyond the stars on a cold morning in December. A young technician named Peter Collins was the first human to read the words that would change everything. He sat alone in the Deep Space Monitoring Station near the edge of the solar system, drinking his third cup of coffee when his screen lit up with symbols he had never seen before. At first, Peter thought the computer had broken. The symbols made no sense. They looked like art more than language. But the computer's translation program was already working, breaking down the patterns, finding meaning in the chaos. Within 3 hours, the message was clear. Humanity was not alone. And someone out there wanted to talk. The news spread across Earth like fire. Governments held emergency meetings. Religious leaders prayed for guidance. Scientists celebrated and worried in equal measure. The message was simple and polite. A group called the Galactic Federation had been watching Earth for many years. They had seen humanity reach the stars, build colonies on Mars and the moons of Jupiter, and develop faster-than-light travel. They were impressed. They wanted humanity to join their family of spacefaring species. The Federation, according to the message, was made up of 47 different alien races. Some had been traveling between stars for millions of years. They had built a civilization based on peace, trade, and the sharing of knowledge. They promised protection from hostile empires that lurked in the dark spaces between galaxies. They promised medical technology that could cure any disease. They promised star maps that would open the entire galaxy to human exploration. All humanity had to do was send a delegation to meet with them. The United Earth Council chose their representatives carefully. They needed people who were smart, calm, and brave. People who could speak for all of humanity without making mistakes. The debates lasted for weeks, but in the end, 3 names rose above the rest. Ambassador Daniel Cooper was a former senator from a small town in Ohio. He had spent 30 years in politics, solving problems and making peace between groups that hated each other. He was not flashy or loud. He was patient and kind, with gray hair and a soft voice that made people trust him. When he spoke, people listened. More importantly, when he listened, people felt heard. Dr. Nina Vance was the greatest scientist of her generation. She had studied alien life forms found in the ice of Europa and the clouds of Titan. She had written books about what alien civilizations might look like. Now she would finally see if her theories were correct. Nina was younger than Daniel, with dark skin and curious eyes that missed nothing. She asked questions constantly, always searching for answers. Admiral Kevin Marsh was the military voice of the group. He had commanded the first human warship to travel faster than light. He had fought pirates in the asteroid belt and defended Earth's colonies from threats both human and unknown. Kevin was tall and strong, with a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. But behind his serious expression was a mind that never stopped thinking about how to protect his people. These 3 boarded the starship. Endurance on a bright spring morning. Millions of people watched the launch. Children waved flags. Old men and women cried with joy. Humanity was taking its biggest step yet. The journey took 3 months. The Federation had sent coordinates to a place called Valoria Prime, a planet at the center of their territory. The Endurance traveled faster than light, bending space itself to cross distances that would have taken thousands of years with normal engines. During the trip, the 3 representatives studied everything they could about the Federation. They learned about the different species, their histories, their customs, and their laws. One law stood out above all others. It was called the Sharing Accord, according to the Federation's rules. Every member species was required to share their technology with all other members. Every invention, every discovery, every scientific breakthrough was added to a massive database that everyone could access. The idea was simple. If everyone shared, everyone benefited. A cure developed by one species could save lives across the galaxy. A new engine design could help all ships travel faster and safer. Daniel read about the Sharing Accord many times during the journey. It seemed fair. It seemed generous. But something about it bothered him. A small voice in the back of his mind that whispered warnings he could not quite understand. When the Endurance finally arrived at Valoria Prime, the The sight took their breath away. The planet was covered in gleaming cities that stretched toward the sky. Millions of ships moved through space around it, like fireflies dancing in the night. Space stations, the size of small moons, floated in orbit, each one home to millions of beings from dozens of different species. A small ship came to guide them to the surface. As they descended through the clouds, Nina pressed her face against the window, like a child seeing snow for the first time. Below them, towers of crystal and metal rose from gardens of alien plants. Rivers of silver water flowed through the city, crossed by bridges that seemed too delicate to hold any weight. The landing pad was surrounded by crowds. Hundreds of aliens had come to see the new species. Some looked almost human, tall and elegant with silver skin and kind eyes. These were the Valor, the founders of the Federation. Others were stranger, insect-like creatures with many legs, floating beings made of gas and light, and things that Daniel's mind could barely process. A Valori stepped forward to greet them. He introduced himself as High Chancellor Zorath, the leader of the Federation Council. He was ancient, his silver skin marked with lines of age, but his eyes were sharp and bright. He welcomed humanity with warm words and a gentle smile. Over the next several weeks, the human delegation was treated like honored guests. They were shown the wonders of Federation technology. They saw machines that could create food from nothing, medicine that could regrow lost limbs, and ships that could cross the galaxy in days instead of months. They met representatives from all 47 species, each one curious about the newcomers, but always the conversation returned to the sharing accord. The Federation wanted to know what humanity could contribute. They asked about human weapons, human computers, human medical research. They were especially interested in the human faster-than-light drive, which worked on principles different from their own. Daniel smiled and nodded and said that humanity was honored by the interest. He asked questions about the Accord, about how it worked, about what happened to species that joined. He listened carefully to every answer, and slowly a picture began to form in his mind. A picture that troubled him deeply. He sent a long message back to Earth, encrypted with codes that only the United Earth Council could read. Then he waited for their response, knowing that whatever decision they made would change humanity's future forever. The Federation had no idea what was coming. The Grand Assembly on Valoria Prime was the largest building Daniel Cooper had ever seen. It could hold 1 million beings at once, with seats carved into walls that rose so high they disappeared into clouds of soft light. The ceiling showed the stars themselves. A perfect map of the galaxy that updated in real time as ships moved through space. Today, every seat was full. Representatives from all 47 species of the Galactic Federation had come to witness history. Humanity was about to give its answer. Daniel walked to the central podium with Nina and Kevin at his sides. The 3 humans looked very small in that massive room, surrounded by creatures that had traveled between stars when humans were still living in caves. But Daniel's steps were steady, and his heart was calm. He had spent weeks preparing for this moment. High Chancellor Zorath sat on a raised platform at the front of the chamber. His silver face was impossible to read, but his eyes followed the humans with great interest. Beside him sat the other council leaders, representatives of the oldest and most powerful species in the Federation. The chamber fell silent as Daniel reached the podium. The silence was so complete that he could hear his own heartbeat. He took a deep breath and began to speak. High Chancellor, honored representatives, we thank you for your patience and your hospitality. The people of Earth have discussed your offer at great length. We have studied your history, your laws, and your technology. We admire what you have built. The Galactic Federation has created something wonderful, a place where different species can live together in peace and cooperation. He could feel the weight of 1 billion watching eyes. However, after careful thought, we must respectfully decline to sign the sharing accord. The silence lasted for exactly 3 seconds. Then the chamber exploded with noise. Clicks, whistles, screams, and sounds that human ears could barely hear filled the air. Some delegates jumped from their seats. Others stared at the humans with expressions of pure shock. In 10,000 years, no species had ever refused the sharing accord. It was simply not done. High Chancellor Zorath raised one hand, and slowly the noise faded. His face remained calm, but Daniel could see something new in those ancient eyes. Curiosity, perhaps? Or the first hint of anger? Ambassador Cooper Zoroth said, his voice carrying easily through the vast chamber. Perhaps you do not fully understand what you are refusing. The sharing accord is the foundation of everything the Federation has built. It ensures that no species falls behind, that all benefit equally from progress. Without it, their W.A. owled be war, jealousy, and suffering. Daniel nodded. We understand, High Chancellor. And we mean no disrespect to your traditions, but humanity has concerns that we cannot ignore. A Kreth delegate, an insect-like being with 6 arms and compound eyes, clicked angrily from across the chamber. What concerns could be greater than the good of the galaxy? Are humans so selfish that they would hoard their knowledge while others suffer? We are not selfish, Daniel said calmly. We simply believe that sharing everything is not always the best path forward. The noise rose again, louder this time. Daniel heard the word arrogance in a dozen different languages. He heard accusations of greed, of pride, of thinking too highly of their young species. He let the noise wash over him like a wave, waiting for it to pass. Nina stepped forward to stand beside him. Her voice was quiet, but the chamber's technology carried it to every corner of the massive room. May I ask a question? She said. The noise slowly died down. High Chancellor Zorath nodded for her to continue. I have been studying the Federation's technological database, Nina said. It is truly impressive. Thousands of inventions, millions of discoveries, all freely available to anyone who wants them. But I noticed something strange. She pulled out a small device and projected images into the air above the podium. These are the dates when each major technology was added to the database. Look at them carefully. The images showed a timeline stretching back 10,000 years. At the beginning, new technologies appeared constantly, dozens per year. But as time went on, the number dropped. In the last 6,000 years, there had been almost no new additions at all. Your technology has not changed in 6,000 years, Nina said. Why would anyone develop something new when they can simply access the database? Why struggle to solve a problem when the answer is already there, waiting to be borrowed? The chamber was silent now, but it was a different kind of silence. Some delegates looked uncomfortable. Others looked angry. A few, Daniel noticed, looked thoughtful. Admiral Kevin Marsh spoke next. His voice was deep and strong, the voice of a man who had faced death many times and was not afraid. Humanity has survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, and the foolishness of our own wars. Each time we survived because we learned to adapt, to create, to solve problems that seemed impossible. If we stop trying, if we simply take what others have already made, we lose the very thing that makes us strong. High Chancellor Zorath leaned forward in his seat. You speak as if innovation is more important than peace. The sharing accord has prevented wars for millennia. Peace is precious, Kevin agreed. But peace without growth is just waiting to die. The galaxy is not safe. You have told us about the hostile empires at the edge of known space. What happens when they develop new weapons and you have forgotten how to create your own? A ripple of unease moved through the chamber. The hostile empires were not often discussed in public. They were a shadow at the edge of Federation space, growing stronger every century, while the Federation remained the same. Daniel stepped forward again. We do not wish to be your enemy. We want to be your partner, your friend, but we cannot sign an agreement that we believe will harm us in the long run. We ask only that you respect our decision, as we respect your traditions. High Chancellor Zorath sat in silence for a long moment. His ancient eyes studied the 3 humans as if seeing them for the first time.
The council.
We'll discuss your words, he said finally. You have given us much to think about. But I warn you, Ambassador Cooper, the Federation has existed for 10,000 years. We have seen species come and go. Your refusal will not be forgotten. Daniel bowed his head respectfully. We understand, High Chancellor, and we hope that one day you will see that we made this choice not out of arrogance, but out of love for what makes us human. The human delegation left the chamber in silence. Behind them, The greatest political body in the galaxy began to argue about what to do with the strange species that had dared to say no and far away. On a small blue planet called Earth, billions of people held their breath and waited to see what would happen next. The days following the refusal were difficult for the human delegation. They were no longer treated as honored guests. The friendly smiles disappeared. The invitations to cultural events stopped coming. When they walked through the streets of Valoria Prime, aliens who had once been curious now looked at them with cold eyes. Daniel Cooper spent most of his time in the small quarters Federation had given them. He wrote reports for Earth, answered thousands of questions from worried officials, and prepared for what he knew was coming. The Federation would not simply accept their refusal. They would push back. They would demand explanations. The summons came on the 7th day. The Council wanted to meet with the human delegation privately, away from the cameras and crowds of the Grand Assembly. The meeting would take place in the High Chancellor's personal chambers. Daniel, Nina and Kevin walked through the crystal hallways of the government building in silence. Guards watched them at every corner, their alien faces showing no emotion. The beauty of Valoria Prime no longer felt welcoming. It felt like a cage made of gold. High Chancellor Zorath waited for them in a room filled with plants from 100 different worlds. Water flowed down the walls in thin streams, creating a soft sound that was almost like music. The old Valori stood by a window, looking out at the city below. "Please sit," he said, without turning around. His voice was tired. The humans sat on chairs that adjusted automatically to fit their bodies. They waited in silence until Zorath finally turned to face them. "I have ruled this Federation for 400 years," he said. "In that time, I have welcomed 73 new species into our family. Each one signed the sharing accord without hesitation. Each one was grateful for the gifts we offered. And then came humanity." He sat down across from them, moving slowly, like a man carrying a great weight. "I do not understand you," he admitted. "Your species is so young. You have been traveling between stars for barely a generation. We offer you everything, and you refuse. Why?" Daniel looked at Nina. She nodded and stood up, pulling out her data device. "Hi, Chancellor. May I show you something?" Zorath waved his hand in permission. Nina projected images into the air between them. "This is human history. Not the whole thing, just the last 500 years." The images showed sailing ships crossing oceans, steam engines pulling trains, airplanes taking to the sky, rockets launching toward the moon, and finally, starships jumping through space faster than light. 500 years ago. "We could not cross an ocean," Nina said. 300 years ago, we could not fly. 100 years ago, we could not leave our planet. 12 years ago, we discovered faster than light travel. Look at how fast we moved, how much we learned in such a short time." Zorath studied the images. "Impressive," he admitted. "But what is your point?" "The point is that we never stopped," Nina said. "Every generation faced problems that seemed impossible. Every generation found solutions that the previous generation could not imagine. This is who we are. This is what makes us human." She changed the display to show Federation technology. "Now, look at your history. 6,000 years ago, you had faster-than-light travel. You had medical technology that could cure any disease. You had weapons that could destroy planets. And today, 6,000 years later, what has changed?" The silence in the room was heavy. "Nothing has changed," Nina continued gently. "Your ships are the same. Your medicine is the same. Your weapons are the same. You stopped growing." Zorath's silver face showed the first hint of emotion, a flash of something that might have been pain. "We stopped because we reached perfection. Why change what already works?" Admiral Kevin Marsh shook his head. "Nothing is perfect, High Chancellor, and nothing stays the same forever. You told us about the hostile empires at the edge of the galaxy. They are growing stronger. Their technology is advancing. What happens when they catch up to you? What happens when they surpass you?" Zorath was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "We do not like to speak of such things," Daniel said. And that is exactly why we cannot sign the sharing accord. We are afraid that if we stop trying to improve, if we simply accept what others give us, we will become like you, comfortable, safe, and slowly dying without even knowing it. The words hung in the air like a knife. Daniel had not meant to be cruel, but the truth was not always kind. Zorath stood and walked back to the window. The city spread out below him, beautiful and unchanging, the same as it had been for thousands of years. When I was young, he said, the Federation faced a great crisis. A plague swept through a dozen worlds, killing millions. Our scientists worked day and night to find a cure. And they did. They saved us. He turned to face the humans. That was 6,000 years ago. Since then, we have not needed to work day and night. The answers have always been there, waiting in the database. But what if a new plague comes? Nina asked. One that is not in the database? Would your scientists even know how to search for a cure? Zorath did not answer. He did not need to. They all knew the truth. Daniel stood and walked to stand beside the ancient alien. Hi, Chancellor. We do not think we are better than you. We are. Younger, yes. Weaker in many ways. But we have something that your people have lost. We have hunger. We have the need to grow, to learn, to become more than we are. If we give that away, we give away everything. What do you want from us? Zorath asked. If not membership, if not the sharing accord, then what? Friendship, Daniel said simply. Partnership. We want to trade with you, learn from you, and share what we discover in our own way, at our own pace. Not because we are forced to, but because we choose to. And we want the same freedom for you. The freedom to start growing again. Zorath looked at Daniel for a long time. Something was changing behind those ancient eyes. A door opening that had been closed for thousands of years. The Council will not agree easily, Zorath said finally. There will be those who see you as a threat to be eliminated. But I will speak for you. I will try to make them understand. He reached out and placed his hand on Daniel's shoulder. The touch was light, almost fragile. Zorath said quietly, It is time for the Federation to remember what it means to be hungry. The council chamber was smaller than the Grand Assembly, but no less impressive. 12 seats arranged in a circle, one for each of the founding species of the Federation. In the center stood the human delegation, surrounded by the most powerful beings in the galaxy. A Kreth delegate named Vix was speaking. His voice was sharp and clicking, filled with anger that he did not try to hide. Words are meaningless, Vix declared. Humanity speaks of innovation, of hunger, of growth. But what have they actually achieved? Their faster-than-light drive is crude compared to ours. Their weapons are primitive. Their medical science is centuries behind. They refuse to share because they have nothing worth sharing. Several delegates nodded in agreement. The mood in the chamber was hostile. High Chancellor Zorath had kept his promise to speak for humanity, but his words had not been enough to convince the others. Daniel Cooper kept his face calm, but inside he was worried. The Council was considering severe actions against Earth. Some wanted to block humanity from all Federation space. Others wanted to go further, to make an example of the young species that had dared to refuse their generosity. Then Zorath spoke. Perhaps we should give humanity a chance to prove their claims. A test of their supposed innovation. The chamber went quiet. Vix's compound eyes focused on the High Chancellor. What kind of test? Zorath stood slowly from his seat. For 300 years, the Federation has faced a problem that none of our greatest minds have been able to solve. The void storms at the edge of the Perseus arm. A ripple of unease moved through the chamber. The void storms were not discussed often. They were a source of shame for the Federation, proof that their perfect civilization had limits. 214 colonies destroyed, Zorath continued. Thousands of ships lost. Millions of lives ended. We have studied the storms for generations. We have tried every solution in our database. Nothing works. The storms continue to grow, and we continue to die. He turned to face the humans. If humanity is truly as capable as they claim, let them solve the void storms. Give them 1 year. If they succeed, we will consider their request for a different kind of partnership. If they fail, they will sign the sharing accord like everyone else. The council debated for hours, but in the end, they agreed. It was a perfect trap. The void storms were impossible to solve. Humanity would fail, and their arrogance would be exposed for all the galaxy to see. Daniel accepted the challenge without hesitation. The starship Endurance departed Valoria Prime the next day. The journey to the Perseus arm took 3 weeks. During that time, Nina Vance did not sleep more than a few hours each night. She studied every piece of data the Federation had collected about the void storms. She read thousands of research papers written by alien scientists. She watched recordings of ships being torn apart by forces that should not exist. The void storms were not natural. That much was clear. There were tears in the fabric of space itself, places where the normal rules of physics broke down. Energy poured out of these tears in massive waves, destroying anything that came too close. The Federation had tried to seal them, contain them, and avoid them. Nothing worked. The storms appeared without warning and vanished just as suddenly, leaving destruction in their wake. When the Endurance finally arrived at the edge of the storm zone, the crew gathered on the observation deck to watch. What they saw was terrifying and beautiful at the same time. The storm looked like a wound in reality, a swirling mass of colors that should not exist. Lightning that was not lightning crackled across its surface. Ships that had been destroyed centuries ago could still be seen floating in the chaos. Frozen in the moment of their death, Nina stared at the storm for a long time. Something about it felt familiar, like a song she had heard once as a child but could not quite remember. "It's oscillating," she said suddenly. Kevin Marsh looked at her. "What do you mean?" "The energy output. It's not random. It's following a pattern. A very complex pattern, but still a pattern." Her eyes were wide, her mind racing. The Federation scientists were looking for a way to stop the storm. But what if we don't need to stop it? What if we just need to match its rhythm? The next several months were the hardest of Nina's life. She worked with a small team of human scientists, building and testing and failing and building again. They slept in shifts, ate when they remembered to, and argued constantly about theories that seemed impossible. The breakthrough came on the 263rd day. Nina had built a device about the size of her fist. Inside was a crystal that vibrated at frequencies too high for human ears to detect. When the crystal's vibration matched the storm's oscillation pattern, something remarkable happened. The storm calmed. Not completely. Not permanently. But for a few precious minutes, the chaotic energy smoothed out into something almost peaceful. Ships could pass through. Colonies could be saved. Nina called it a harmonic stabilizer. The name did not matter. What mattered was that it worked. The Endurance returned to Valoria Prime with 1 day to spare before the deadline. The council watched in stunned silence as Nina demonstrated the device. A small piece of void storm energy had been captured in a containment field. When Nina activated the stabilizer, the swirling chaos settled into gentle waves of soft light. Vix was the first to speak. "Impossible. We have studied these storms for 300 years. How could humans solve in 1 year what we could not solve in 3 centuries? Nina smiled gently. "Because we did not look in your database. We started from nothing and asked new questions. We made mistakes and learned from them. We tried things that had never been tried before." She held up the small device. "This uses principles that exist in your archives." The knowledge was always there, but no one combined it in this way, because no one needed to. The answer was supposed to already exist. High Chancellor Zoreth rose from his seat and walked slowly toward Nina. His ancient hands were trembling as he reached out to touch the stabilizer. 300 years, he whispered. Millions of lives lost. And the answer was always there, waiting for someone to think of it. He looked at Daniel Cooper, and for the first time since the humans had arrived, there was no judgment in his eyes. "Only wonder, what are you?" Zoreth asked. Daniel thought about the question for a moment. "We are human," he said finally. "We are young and foolish, and we make terrible mistakes. But we never stop trying. We never stop reaching for something more. That is the only secret we have." Zoroth held the stabilizer close to his chest, like a precious gift. Then perhaps, he said quietly, it is the most important secret in the galaxy. The grand assembly was full again. Every seat was taken. And millions more watched through screens across the galaxy. The atmosphere was different this time. The anger and suspicion had faded, replaced by something harder to define. Curiosity, perhaps, or hope. High Chancellor Zoroth stood at the central podium, looking older and more tired than Daniel had ever seen him. But there was also a strange light in his eyes, a spark that had not been there before. For 10,000 years, Zoroth began, his voice carrying to every corner of the massive chamber. The Galactic Federation has followed the sharing accord. Every species that joined us contributed their knowledge to our collective database. Every species benefited from the wisdom of others. We believed this was the only path to peace and progress. He paused, letting his words settle over the assembly. Then humanity came. They looked at what we had built and saw something we could not see. They saw that our peace had become a prison. Our progress had become stagnation. We were so comfortable borrowing from each other that we forgot how to create. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some delegates looked angry. Others looked thoughtful. A few looked ashamed. The humans solved the void storms in 1 year, Zoroth continued. A problem we could not solve in 300. Not because they are smarter than us, not because they have better technology, but because they still remember how to think differently. They still remember how to fail and learn and try again. He turned to look at the human delegation. Daniel, Nina, and Kevin stood together, watching and waiting. I've been the leader of this federation for 400 years, Zoroth said. In all that time, I never questioned our ways. But now I must ask myself a difficult question. What kind of future are we building if we have stopped trying to build anything new? The chamber was completely silent now. Zoroth's words were cutting deep into beliefs that had stood for thousands of years. The council has debated for many weeks about what to do with humanity. Some wanted to force them to sign the accord. Others wanted to banish them from Federation space. But I have proposed a different solution, and after much discussion, the council has agreed. He took a deep breath. Humanity will be granted associate membership in the Galactic Federation. They will be exempt from the sharing accord. The chamber erupted into noise. Shouts of protest mixed with murmurs of approval. Vix jumped from his seat, his compound eyes blazing. This is madness. If we allow one species to refuse the accord, others will follow. Our entire system will collapse. Perhaps it should, Zoroth replied calmly. Perhaps it is time for a new system. The noise grew louder. Arguments broke out between delegates. For a moment, it seemed like the entire Federation might tear itself apart right there in the assembly hall. Then Daniel Cooper stepped forward. He raised his hand, not demanding attention, just asking for it. Slowly, the noise faded. The galaxy turned to listen. We did not come here to destroy what you have built, Daniel said. The Federation has accomplished something wonderful. You have brought peace to a galaxy that knew only war. You have saved countless lives. We do not want to take that away. He looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many delegates as he could. But we believe that peace and growth can exist together, that sharing and creating are not opposite things. We refuse to sign the sharing accord because we believe it would hurt us. But we are not asking you to abandon it. We are asking you to think about it, to question whether it is still serving you well. Nina stepped forward to stand beside him. We would like to propose something new. Instead of forcing us to share our technology, allow us to share our methods. Send your scientists to work with ours. Not to take what we have made, but to learn how we make things. Teach your young people to ask questions again, to experiment, to fail without fear. It will be slow, Kevin added. It will be difficult. Your people have not had to struggle for a very long time, but we believe it is worth trying. We believe that deep down, every species in this federation still has the ability to create. It just needs to be awakened. Zoroth nodded slowly. This is what the council has agreed to. Humanity will become associate members, free from the accord. In exchange, they will accept observers from our worlds, scientists and scholars who wish to learn their ways. It is a small step, but perhaps it is the beginning of something larger. The vote took place that afternoon. It was not unanimous. Vix and several other delegates refused to accept the new arrangement, but in the end, enough voted yes. Humanity became the first associate member in Federation history. The ceremony was simple and quiet. Daniel signed his name to a document written in 100 different languages. He shook hands with High Chancellor Zorith. Nina smiled at the Federation scientists who were already asking her questions about human research methods. Kevin nodded respectfully to the military commanders who were curious about human tactics. It was not a perfect ending. There would be challenges ahead. Some species would resent humanity for being different. Others would struggle to change their ways. The hostile empires at the edge of the galaxy were still growing stronger, but something had shifted. A door had opened that had been closed for 6,000 years. As the Endurance prepared to leave, Valoria Prime and return to Earth. Daniel stood at the observation window, looking out at the gleaming alien city one last time. Zoroth came to stand beside him. "I have a question," the old Valory said. "When you first came here, when you saw all that we had built, were you not tempted? Did you not want to simply accept our gifts and join our family?" Daniel thought about it for a moment. "Yes," he admitted. "The temptation was strong. Your technology could have solved so many of our problems. But my grandmother used to tell me something when I was a child. She said that the things we are given have less value than the things we earn. I did not fully understand her then. I think I do now." Zoroth smiled, a rare expression on his silver face. "Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman," just as Daniel agreed. "She was also stubborn and difficult, and never stopped asking questions. I think you would have liked her." They stood together in silence, watching the stars. Out there, somewhere, young scientists on a dozen different worlds were beginning to question things they had always accepted. Old scholars were dusting off experiments that had been abandoned thousands of years ago. The hunger that humanity carried like a fire in their hearts was starting to spread. It would take time. Generations, perhaps. But the galaxy was waking up, and at the center of it all stood a small blue planet called Earth, filled with a young species that had refused to stop reaching for the stars. They were not the strongest. They were not the wisest. They were not the oldest, but they had something more important. They had the courage to say no, and the wisdom to offer something better in return. The future was uncertain. It was also, for the first time in 6,000 years, full of possibility, and that made all the difference.